Greetings. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Marin Municipal Water District Board meeting for July 7th, 2026. May I please have a roll call?
Good evening, Director Ranjit Kush,
Here.
Director Diana Mayer,
Here.
Vice President Larry Russell,
Here.
Director Matt Sampson,
Here.
and President Jed Smith.
Here.
Thank you.
May I please have someone make a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Any public comment on the agenda?
On the agenda, there are none.
Okay, great. Roll call, please.
Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Mayer,
Aye.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
Director Sampson,
Yes.
and President Smith.
Aye.
Thank you.
Any public comments on non-agenda matters?
Yes,
Phil.
we have a couple. Just remind everyone it's 3 minutes. The first is Phil Sauter.
Good afternoon. In July, I'm continuing to see a sharp reduction in the amount of Russian River water we're importing on a daily basis. Last year, we were bringing in 10 million gallons a day from the Russian River, and this year we're bringing in 4 million gallons a day. Last year at this time, Russian River water accounted for 40% of our daily production, and this year it accounts for 18%. Our total daily usage is a little bit less than last year, and our reservoirs are a little bit lower than last year. But why such a big reduction in the amount of Russian River water we're bringing in this year? Why would our daily imports be down by almost 60%? That's almost 6 million gallons a day less than last year's imports. I've been noticing this for the last 2 months, and at 6 million gallons a day over 60 days, that's 360 million gallons of Russian River water we could have taken but haven't. That's 1,100 acre feet of water we haven't taken in just the past 2 months. That 1,100 acre feet could be in our reservoirs right now, ready to help tide us over during the next drought. That's what we've missed during the past 2 months. If we keep drawing the same reduced amount for the next 4 months, that 1,100 acre feet will increase to 3,300 acre feet of missed Russian River water. And that's an amount equal to the expected annual yield of the proposed ARC project. Maybe I'm missing something, and there's a good reason we're not taking the Russian River water we've been taking for so many years, and why we're letting our reservoirs drop at a time when we say we need all the storage we can get. It would sure be helpful to understand why we're planning a heavy ARC investment and bringing in more Russian River water when we're not taking advantage of the pipeline investments we've already made. Perhaps an explanation on the website could help folks understand the current move away from Russian River water. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Lori, then Adina Flores, and Ed Jameson. Go ahead, Lori.
Can you hear me?
Yes, could you please speak a little bit louder?
Hi. This is Lori Alderman, and I've sent you all, from, sorry, Tyler Sylvie started a nasty, Reddit, one in Santa Rosa that went viral, and he needs to be held to a higher standard as communications director. Not only did he go after Adina, but he went after voters like he called me nutty sorry, I have a speech disability. He said I was nutty for supporting and voting for Shalina Morita, who's a candidate that is not one of his favorites. And this kind of political sayings, when you don't have, it should not be coming from somebody who's representing your agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Next, we have Adina Flores. Go ahead, Ms. Flores.
Good evening, board. I don't come to Marin County because Black and brown people are not welcome there unless we're the help. It's the home of California Governor Gavin Newsom, so that says all we need to know. Recently, as Ms. Alderman expressed, your communications director, Tyler Sylvie, decided to start an extremely defamatory and hateful Reddit thread about me online, I believe during work hours, taxpayer-funded work hours. And so I've continually seen posts by Mr. Sylvie during work hours. And so I'm the former executive assistant to the board and superintendent of Santa Rosa Schools. I got forced out for trying to get answers from local government during work hours. So presumably he needs to be fired. So I'm letting you know, I know you guys are sitting there right now in your white privilege, that if he's not fired, ask Sonoma County how they like to deal with me, because law enforcement gets called to come deal with me at least once a week. And so next time, if there's a next time and I must make an appearance in person, I will let your sheriffs know. I'm not sure who has jurisdiction. I'll let the police department know, but I won't be quiet until he's fired. It's absolutely disgusting. White liberals are the most racist people on the planet. So if Mr. Sylvie wants to engage in child abuse by giving his little girl a penis and changing their gender in the court system, that's his right. As I told him many times, I follow Christ. We're given our God-given identity from birth, and that comes from God. That is not to be argued. So I don't agree with Mr. Sylvie, and therefore, because I'm practicing my faith as a BIPOC woman, because Mr. Sylvie is full of white privilege and thinks it's acceptable to attack anybody who doesn't want to cave to the ideologies of white liberals, he started that Reddit thread. So, it had about 50,000 likes, I think. It's going viral right now. My followers are highly offended that he would decide to change his little girl, beautiful little girl, into a boy. That is child abuse. So please fire Tyler Sylvie. I'm not kidding. You can look me up. Feel free. I will be at your next meeting, and I will be a problem if you don't fire him. God bless you. God bless you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. Next, we have Ed Jameson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
In the June 16th presentation, updating the urban water master plan required by the state of California every 5 years, slide number 6 showed an assumed drought demand level 10% above the 2024 actual in a non-drought year, generating discussion that this might be too conservative. 2020 was only a moderate drought year, but we used 9% more water than in 2019 when we had average rainfall. So adding 10% to the 2024 level was not conservative. It was analytically appropriate for drought planning. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Perfect. Now we'll go to, Director and General Manager's comments. Ranjiv.
Nothing, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Matt? No. I'll just report back that had a quite interesting trip to Washington, D.C. Last week. Was that last week? 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks.
2 weeks ago? Time's flying. And it was a pleasure working with Sean Horn and Ben and our team, meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers, meeting with Representatives Huffman and Thompson, Padilla's office and Schiff's office about our water supply roadmap, the WRDA funding, where we have $28 million of funding that has been earmarked for us, and we're starting to draw that down, and we'll be discussing that later this evening. What I found most enlightening was that our proposals and our thought process was at least seemingly extremely well received by the Army Corps and other folks who we talked to, who recognized that the drought that hit us and the months of supply, the few months of supply that we had left during that last drought, was enough to warrant significant federal and state input. So I look forward to continuing work from Marin Water and attaining some of these funds, and thank you for that. So it was an enlightening meeting. General Manager Hornstein, any comments? Okay. Great. Moving on to committee reports. I think we have one. Yes.
Thank you, President Smith. We had our watershed committee. We held it on the evening of Thursday, June 18th, where we heard a very comprehensive presentation and summary of all the work that's been done going into the the Road and Trails Management Plan upgrade. And after that presentation, we took public comment, pretty lengthy, and also board comment, and we were able to give direction to staff for a preferred path forward or preferred scenario moving forward into what would be the notice of preparation as we move into the EIR CEQA process, hopefully in August, early September. End of report.
Great. Thank you.
I've got several. I attended the American Water Works Association meeting in Washington, D.C., and it was quite an enlightening meeting. There was a change in the vendor mix, which I thought was quite interesting. There are many more small companies and fewer big companies attending the displays, which I found fascinating. On Monday last week, I attended the North Bay Water, used to be Reuse Association, now it's the Resiliency Association. So they're changing their name to try to better fit into grant funding, I believe. Then the planning committee was held on Thursday, June 30th. It's actually Tuesday, June 30th. Staff briefed the committee on the proposed capital improvement program, North Marin Line Stabilization Phase 1 project, which would relocate and replace a control valve that is critical to transporting water from Kent Reservoir and Nicasio Reservoir to the San Geronimo Water Treatment Plant. That particular valve and the pipeline currently sits above an open creek and is in kind of a vulnerable situation. The first phase of this project is located on Lower Peters Dam Road near Sir Francis Drake. The project is scheduled for advertisement in August, and staff plans to bring it before the board at a future meeting to consider for formal approval. Staff also presented proposed professional services agreements for on-call geotechnical engineering and field and laboratory testing services. Each contract would have a 3-year term. These services were advertised on June 12th, 2026, and staff plans to bring the agreements before the board at a future meeting to consider for formal approval. Staff also presented a proposed amendment to an agreement with Panorama Environmental for environmental compliance and permitting services to assist the district with various capital improvement projects as needed. Staff plans to bring the amendment before the board at a future meeting for formal approval. In addition, staff provided a comprehensive overview of the district's information technology initiatives, which was quite an interesting session. I would suggest anyone who didn't see it or didn't attend to listen to it. Projects planned over the next several years to improve internal systems, increase operational efficiency, and enhance cyber protection. We're going to be spending a fair amount of money over the next 10 years or so on this effort. Staff also presented 2 laboratory analysis agreements for fiscal year 2027 and fiscal year 2028 to assist the district with water quality analysis and regulatory compliance measures. Staff advertised these agreements in May and selected Alpha Analytical Laboratory and Eurofin's Eaton Analytical. Awards of these agreements are on tonight's agenda for the board to consider for approval. The public may access the staff reports and a video recording of the June 30 Planning Committee meeting on Marin Water website. Diana, you need to announce that you were at the AWWA meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
I was going to say
And we
something.
also had North Bay Watershed. I can take them.
Oh, yeah, that one too. Yes,
Right.
that's right. MBWA was in there. Yes.
That's right.
Yep.
On the same day as the planning commission meeting, there was a North Bay Watershed Association meeting. The main point of the meeting was to discuss the work plan coming up for the next year in terms of grants and planning and projects. And so lots on the horizon. The grant program will continue, which was a really big thing. And then more to follow coming out of our next meeting.
Terrific.
So 2 things. Let me start with the Finance and Administration Committee report. The Finance and Administration Committee met on Thursday, June 25th, and we got an overview we got our monthly financial update, and as has been a trend for the last several months, we had higher than anticipated revenues last month. We've been down in our revenues, but we've also had lower expenditures. So Brett's analysis is that we will have a balanced budget for the fiscal year. And those video recording of that and the staff reports are available on the website. I was also at the AWWA conference. I attended some interesting things, a public officials track that I attended. 2 things I thought were just worth mentioning. The big focus this year, a lot of it was on AI and how AI is being used at different government entities and sort of how it can be used in a way that's positive. Similarly, there was a lot of concern, and I went to a public officials breakfast Where we talked a lot about the data centers, and granted, I don't anticipate that ever being a big problem in Marin. I think it's an important thing to be aware. There's a lot of concern because data centers are largely, they're using incredible amounts of water. So I just thought I would put that out there as something for people to be paying attention to. Thanks.
Terrific. All good? Okay. Moving on to our consent items. May I please have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Any public comments?
There are none.
Okay, great. We have a roll call for the 5 items listed.
Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Mayer,
Aye.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
Director Sampson,
Yes.
President Smith.
Aye. Terrific. Moving on to our regular items. Thank you for sitting there patiently waiting for us. We'll move on to our partnership agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for water supply projects.
Good evening, Board. I'm Sean Horn, Director of Watershed Resources. I'm joined with Haley Eligio, our Grants and Legislative Analyst. This is an action item for you. This is approval of a partnership agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This is occurring as part of our Water Resource Development Act authorization that happened in 2022 through our collaboration with Congressman Huffman's office. This identified $28 million for the district to advance the water supply roadmap and projects associated with it. So I'm going to hand it to Haley to provide some background on the process that we've been working through and what's gotten us to this stage to date to present this partnership agreement.
Cool. Good evening, Haley Eligio, Principal Grant and Legislative Analyst. As Sean mentioned, this is an action item for the board. The district was written into the 2022 WRDA, the Water Resources Development Act, authorizing $28 million in federal funding through the Army Corps' Environmental Infrastructure Project. WRDA is an authorizing piece of legislation only, meaning it doesn't come with funding. So since that authorization in 2022, staff have been working with Congressman Huffman's office to get the first appropriation of that funding, which we successfully secured in January 2026 through the Federal Energy and Water Appropriations Act, and we were subsequently written into the Corps' 2026 work plan. So over the last few months, staff have participated in several meetings with the Army Corps San Francisco District to determine the appropriate scope of that initial $2 million appropriation. And through those discussions, our engineering team has identified a segment of pipeline in the Atmospheric River Capture Project, which is the district's current longer-term preferred alternative water supply project. And the Corps will advance that from 30% design to 100% design. In terms of next steps, we're here tonight to recommend entering into a project partnership agreement or a PPA with the Army Corps of Engineers. The total initial increment cost is $2,658,333, and that includes a required 25% district cost share of $658,333. If approved, staff will begin finalizing that PPA with the Corps. Our design team, consultant, and staff will be involved in the project review as the Army Corps advances this initial component of work. And then in terms of future appropriations, staff have submitted congressionally directed spending requests through Congressman Huffman, Congressman Padilla, and Senator Schiff to secure additional water appropriations in fiscal year 27.
And a couple points. So this is going to support a design of a segment of the pipeline, not the entire pipeline. And then there's also WRDA is something that happens every 2 years. So there's a process going on to look at the next WRDA bill, which would be 2026. And that's currently in the committee process right now, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And we were notified recently that the district and Sonoma Water are in a line item for that authorization as well for a much larger amount, about 60 million that would be shared between the two. So we were in conversation with Sonoma Water about what that looks like for Marin, and we'll be tracking that as it makes it through the process. And we'll give you updates as needed.
Great. Thank you. That's all. Terrific. Okay, Matt, questions?
Thank you for the update. And I think thank you for the work to continue on this, because you're teasing with the 60 million. I don't want to get too excited yet. Just the fact that we are getting noticed and acknowledged for the work we're doing. And I also want to give kudos to the board, because a lot of work was done on a variety of trips and a lot of advocacy work to show the value of this project. But for me, what I think is important about this action is that there's others at different levels of government that value what we're doing and also recognize the importance of this project and how critical it is to Marin water, but also a benefit to the entire region. And so it's not just us saying this is a good idea. We're getting now federally recognized that this is an important project, and it makes me feel real good about the choice we made as this preferred option. Thank you.
Great. Director Russell, any comments?
No.
Great. Director Meyer?
No.
Comments? Great.
Good.
Great update, very clear. The write-up was also clear. Encouraging to hear that we're under consideration for additional funding. I think I really feel it's important to reiterate what both President Smith and Director Sampson have said about the importance that this work is being recognized for at federal and state levels. I think it speaks a lot to the direction that we're taking with the ARC project and the direction we're taking towards regional resiliency. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Agreed. Can you talk a little bit about the timing component of this? It seems like we have to kind of get access to this now, right? So the reason why this is coming forward is we can't wait. Or talk a little bit more about the timing, why we're approving this tonight.
Yeah, so the timing is we work through each fiscal year process to try to get some authorization of this funding for the work plan of the Army Corps. So the Army Corps is actually the entity that carries out the work. Right. We want them to be kind of charged with implementing some of our water supply roadmap each fiscal year, if possible. And the amount of funding that they'll have will really be determined by our kind of collaboration and partnership with our congressional representatives. Most likely. So we'll be going back each year and asking for additional funding, showing a need, and then coming up with kind of incremental components of the project that could be advanced. So it may shift every year in terms of how much funding is available.
And it seems that we haven't approved the full ARC project. We haven't done the full environmental reviews yet. This is just one piece of it. Can you help us understand, let's just say it doesn't all get done. How will we make sure that this is not a wasted project, that this one little piece is going to have lasting impact for us?
Yeah, so this is how the Corps thinks about it is kind of an increment of the project that can be delivered to the local proponent, so us, the water district. So this will be 100% designed for a segment of the project. The district is advancing the design for the larger project, and so it'll kind of interface with that project and at the end of the day result in a design package that the district can evaluate in terms of implementing or not.
Got it. So this is not building that section of the pipeline. It's paying for the design of it, and therefore we're just moving our thought process along. I've heard some concern that why are we approving this now? And so this is just part of our planning process, and they're helping fund that, which is fantastic. Okay, great. That's all I have. Any public comments?
Not for this item.
Okay. Motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Second.
I think Ranji beat you to it. Great. Roll call.
Director Kush?
Aye.
Director Mayer?
Aye.
Vice President Russell?
Aye.
Director Sampson?
Yes.
President Smith?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7B, our water supply and ARC project, the theme of the night.
It does seem water is the theme for us here. I don't know why that is. Good evening, Board. Paul Sellier, Water Resources Director. I'm joined by Lucy Croy. Lucy is our Water Resources Manager and will be giving us a update on what our water supply conditions look like in the upcoming year. And we're also tagging on to this presentation a little update on ARC as we, kind of get questions as folks think and mull the project over. This is a drought water supply project. How are you getting water in the middle of a drought? So we're hoping to at least take a different look at it with some charts and graphs and hopefully be able to provide an answer to that question. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Lucy.
At some point I will get it. Good evening, Board of Directors, Lucy Croy. Water Resources Manager for the district. As Paul mentioned, water supply and ARC project update tonight. So as we move into the summer months, we thought it would be timely to give an update on water supply conditions, a review of the last water year and where we are with water use. And then a quick look ahead at the forecast of some rumblings that we're hearing about the upcoming water year. And then, as Paul mentioned, a look at water supply availability as it relates to the ARC project. So continuing the theme of water supply tonight on all aspects. So a look back at this past year. It seems like a far distant memory now that we're into July. But this past year is shown on the red line, 2025, 2026. And we were actually just a little bit below average. So about 90% of average, just below 47 inches for the year. We had a few storms in December, January, but came up a little bit short from our average of 52 inches. Fortunately, this is back to back on 3 wet winters. So you can see 22, 23, 24, we're all well above average preceding that. And largely because those last 3 wet winters occurred, this past winter, although it was below average for precipitation, our current storage is really still above average. So you see it's well above average. We're about 111% above average for this time of year, and actually in line with last year. So doing quite well for this time of year. 72,000 acre feet for July. And similarly to the north, Sonoma Water is also doing well on their supply conditions. Lake Sonoma, shown on the left here, is well above their average as well. They're actually still in their flood control zone, which is above the water supply pool. And at the water contractors TAC meeting on Monday, Don Seymour for the Sonoma Water mentioned that they're expecting that the Army Corps will actually stay in control of Lake Sonoma probably until late August, which is the latest they've seen, which is a win for FERO, largely because of water levels staying so high. So they expect that to stay up for quite a bit. And Lake Mendocino, while a little bit lower because there were dry conditions in the upper Russian, they still expect it to be in fine condition through the end of this water year. And part of the reason that our supply has stayed well in our storage in our reservoirs is due to lower demand and conservation actions. And so looking at our potable water production, which is often looked at in tandem with our billing. So when finance looks at our billing, which is on a 2-month lag, this is another way of looking at it, our production from our treatment plants. We can look at it on a little bit more of a timely basis. So we were actually able to pull the data through the end of June. And June was about 5% lower than last year. So shown here on the blue bar right here. So compared to last year, 5% lower. In May was about 11% lower. But due to the really hot and dry March that we had, we're actually even with 2025. So right now, the first 6 months are about even with 2025. So we're seeing probably similar numbers between the 2 years. And we'll see where we go, how hot the next few months are. And for the upcoming year, as many of us have started to hear rumblings, NOAA has issued an advisory that they're expecting it to be not only an El Nino, but predicting it to be a super El Nino. And what that means is that the surface water temperatures could be as much as 3 degrees higher. And so looking back through some of the historical records that they have, there's a chart here shown on the left that shows that when these very strong El Ninos come through, what does that mean for different parts of California? And you can see on the lower latitudes, it's quite a bit more water supply. And as you come up, it's a little bit less of an effect. But in the 4 occasions since 1950, when they've had these large El Ninos, it's been well above average. There was one, the Godzilla El Nino, which I did not remember myself, which was in 2015, 2016, and it underdelivered. So it only turned out to be average, but historically it typically is more rainfall. But as we know, with these kind of weather patterns, we can't predict anything. So we'll see where it goes, but it could mean quite a bit of water. And as Paul mentioned, with the theme of water supply tonight, we thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about ARC and some of the questions that have come up recently about the project, and taking a look back at water availability under certain conditions in which we would operate the project, and how it would be operated. So we thought it would be useful to take some time and look at a few of the historical conditions that we've had throughout time, in which we expect to use the ARC project. So those conditions would be dry conditions, lower rainfall, lower runoff, lower amounts of storage in our reservoirs. And then there has to be available flow in the Russian River and available capacity in Nicasio or in our storage system. And so a few months ago, we took a look at our drought of record, 1977, as a bookend to really understand, what is the worst case. And so tonight, we thought it would be useful to take another look at a few other historically dry periods, because they can show kind of a span of how we would use the project and how it could operate. So we'll take a look at the most recent severe drought, 2021. All of us are pretty familiar with that one, as well as a more extended dry period in the 1980s and the single dry year of 2014. So starting first with 2021, this, and I apologize up front, it is a chart heavy presentation. But tonight, so this chart shows rainfall are the orange bars, so monthly rainfall. And the blue line is our storage. So this is over four winters. The gray area in the backdrop are showing the winter months. So trying to kind of signify where your eyes should go for the winter months. And you can see in the winter of 2019, we had above average rainfall and our reservoirs filled up. And then the following winter, the second kind of winter right here, we actually had about 67% of rainfall. And we still did moderately okay, kind of like this year in which we were 90%. But our reservoirs got to about 75,000 acre feet. And then by the third year, we were down to just receiving 38% of normal rainfall. And we really see minimal runoff going into our reservoirs. So this winter right here is what we're going to zoom in on, and this is the winter in which we would expect to really get going on operating ARC. I think in this winter, in this first winter right here, storage is relatively high, that we wouldn't be moving water into ARC as far as a decision making. But for this winter right here, where we continue to have dry conditions, we would look at moving water into Nicasio. So we'll zoom in on this winter period, the October of 2020 through 2021. So looking at that specific period of basically winter of 2021, now looking at the Russian River specifically, and what was going on in that watershed. This chart is showing the blue bars are the amount of flow in the Russian River. So going from around 200, 300 acre feet per day up to over 3,600 acre feet per day. And then the orange line at the bottom is showing our minimum, the minimum in-stream flows to be maintained in the Russian River. And this is again at the point of Hacienda Bridge, which is the point in which water is more or less flowing out to the ocean and after water's been taken. And so the green bars, they look like dots, but they are actually the amount of water that could be taken by ARC. And so what I'm showing here on this chart is actually the opportunity for ARC over a very certain period that we could have taken water. So likely would not have taken it in those early months of the drought because of the decision making behind it. And this is just a scenario that we're looking at as operators of the system. And then really turning on the system by January when we're seeing that there's not much rainfall coming through. And taking advantage of a few larger storms that do happen and turning on the system. Here we're assuming about average operation of the ARC system, so 10 MGD, not maxing it out every day, but operating at an average amount over the 4-month period through the end of the winter season, so through May. And how we expect that to impact our reservoir storage. This is now showing the same chart from before. So our historical reservoir storage, the blue line on the bottom, and then the green line is showing the ARC supply added to that. So we would have seen a bump of around 3,800 acre feet. So operating the ARC system at a conservative level, 10 MGD over 4 months, we would have had a good bump in supply over the next dry period, in which this is where many of our restrictions came into place, and we're working with the community on drought.
I would add that during this period, Nicosia Reservoir was around a couple thousand acre feet. So it was way down in volume, lots of capacity. It's a 22,000 acre foot reservoir. So we'd have more than doubled maybe the water that was remaining in Nicosia Reservoir.
So the idea that Nicosia would not be flooding at that time.
No.
Okay.
And then just to close out looking at 2021, we did pull more than our 5,300 that year. We did pull 7,700, especially as it got later in the year. We looked at taking as much water as we could. So the gray bars are showing how much water we purchased from Sonoma Water that year. And then the green is showing the potential that we could have taken. So tying it back to what you just saw would have been an extra 3,800 acre feet. So a total of just under 12,000 acre feet is the opportunity.
Yeah, again, about 50% more water from Sonoma.
Yep. Stating it a different way, I think what you're actually saying is we have a contractual ability to bring the water down, but we don't have the physical ability.
Correct.
So that green bars are what happens when you put another pipeline in.
Correct.
Yeah.
And storing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So another look, that was 2021. And then we, understanding that each drought is a little bit different and how it plays out, we wanted to take a look at 1987 to 92, which is a little bit more distant in our memory. It was a much longer but less extreme drought. So it was over 6 consecutive winters. You can see on the chart over on the right-hand side that during those 6 consecutive winters, our reservoirs didn't fill, which doesn't sound that impactful, but when you look at our history, it is actually very impactful. Like our reservoirs typically fill and spill on a very regular basis. So to have 6 consecutive years, you can imagine the stress associated with that. And how that played out at the board level and at the community level was that over that period, there was a number of voluntary and emergency mandatory rationing efforts that were put in place. So this list over on the side shows over that period what the conservation and rationing efforts were put on the community. And you can imagine that kind of volatility can be very stressful, especially for the community.
It was stressful to me. I delayed. I had just purchased a house in Tiburon in 92, and we stayed in the East Bay at our other house rather than moving to Marin.
Right.
And just did work on the house in Marin, but didn't move because of the drought, at least in part.
I remember almost 2 weeks of 90-degree weather in November '89. It was bizarre. Yeah, in the city, in San Francisco.
And we had an earthquake.
Yeah.
It was right around the same time, just after that.
Weather.
And it was hot during the earthquake.
So
and the Oakland fire.
Yeah, and the fire. So amazingly, looking at the Russian River, and this chart cuts it off because I wanted to focus on the minimums. But this is now showing the flow in the Russian River. So over that same period, over those 6 winters, actually more, how much flow was in the Russian River and available to utilize over that period. Um, and you can see that it's well above the minimum throughout the entire period, without getting into too much detail. This chart often goes many magnitudes higher. And so how that plays out on storage, if we were to take about 3,800 to 4,000 acre feet each year, depending on availability of storage, is shown on the green line. So similarly, showing the historical storage levels on blue, and then the impact of ARC operations in green. And what's really striking about this chart is that with the operations of ARC, the minimum really never gets below 40,000 acre feet. So it really changes how you operate a rationing program and what kind of implementation of mandatory and conservation efforts you request and require of the community.
But they trigger based on our numbers at 40,000. So this chart shows 3 times during this period it triggered mandatory conservation.
Yeah. And with ARC, it wouldn't.
Yeah.
We've changed our triggers, of course, since then, but back in the day, 40,000 was the trigger level. Yeah. So we would have kept the community out of some of those more severe mandatory rationing events. And I think, for me, as the drought goes on and you're benefiting from that 3,000 to 4,000 acre feet per year, at the end of year 4 in 91, you've got 18,000 more acre feet. That's almost an entire Nicosia reservoir that you've benefited by. So it is a significant help in longer term droughts for us. So,
although it's a little pricey.
And lastly, drought of 2014, it was a single dry year. It was not, at least for the district, it was not nearly as severe as 77 or the 2021. And the district did implement voluntary 25% reductions in water use in January of 2014 as storage levels dropped. But we did receive Miracle March of atmospheric rivers, which did substantially improve our supply late in the water year. So the Russian River during that same period, you can see that it drops down quite a bit and gets pretty close. And so there might be periods where we would take advantage and use it as our storage levels drop and look at, it may look like it gets close, but this is still above 300 to 400 acre feet per day. And the take that we're taking is 30 in this assumption. So it's actually very small. And then there, as I mentioned, there were the Miracle March was a series of atmospheric storms. And those storms came through. And so that would be a great opportunity to run the ARC project. So throughout that period, we would be running it, hopefully maxing it out as much as we could.
Are you sure of that?
Which
because
part?
That's kind of tricky. I think
It is.
Phil Sauter's question is an interesting one here too, is the problem I see with ARC, one of them is that it's very difficult to start moving forward when you don't know what's going to happen, because you're racking up a pretty good bill,
right,
for $1,100 an acre foot plus the cost of retreatment. So you're probably talking $2,000 to $4,000 an acre foot for that water, and if you then watch it go over the spillway, that gets a little exciting.
It's definitely a complication of the project. It is. There's no way of not addressing that. And I think that's what's interesting about taking a look at these historical droughts is that it shows that even though those atmospheric rivers look ginormous, I don't know if that's a real word, if they're massive in the Russian River, when it gets to how they affected our system because we were so dry, you can see on our storage levels that our actual impact, we didn't fill that year. And so we can only look back. We can only look back and see how it worked. We can't predict the future.
I would say to your comment, Director Russell, which is absolutely true. It's the conundrum that we find ourselves in. Any water supply, whether it's conservation costs that we pay for various widgets, or whether we're buying Sonoma water, or whether it's recycled water that we currently produce even or pay for right now.
Sure.
All of that, the moment we spill,
Of course.
is an investment that we've sort of lost for that period of time. That's not to say that we shouldn't do it, because of course the only thing we can't do is run out of water. And so that's what makes some of these decisions really difficult.
I agree with you completely. The problem that I see is the one of how do you decide to move forward? That's the tricky part, because I think the natural result is to hold back. And like I said, I think you should at least touch base on Phil's question, because that's what's being done now. Apparently, we've comfortable by not taking the water that we could be taking.
Yeah, I think there are a number of factors this year that play into that, surrounding some of the comments that we heard about the Finance Committee and where are we in terms of revenues and the budget. And of course, the fact that we're sitting in front of what's being advertised as sort of this super El Nino year. So there's a different maybe level of confidence looking at the future water supply, at least being close to normal. Our current water supply is being very close to full. All of these things sort of play a factor into that. And I would end, I guess, by saying that we're already back to taking about 10 million gallons a day from Sonoma at this point. So we will see that number ratchet up as we get into the new fiscal year.
Yeah, it just speaks to the tricky part of this whole thing.
Exactly.
I have watched this over the years, and I won't say the district gets frozen, but they kind of get frozen. They kind of like don't know what to do, not really confident, understandably. I mean, stoichiometry at its best makes it very difficult to make that decision to drop the hammer and say, go now.
I think on a given year like this year, it's a fair comment. I look at ARC and, you look when we started in here to predict when we would have done it. I don't think there's any question that in January 2014 with this curve, right, we would be exercising ARC and see this benefit.
Yes, but the problem is if you take the scenario that Paul just laid out, which was budgets are tight,
right?
Where do you find the extra 5 million? Reserves, potentially.
Right.
But it throws especially the GM and that upper management group into kind of what I've observed, kind of a tizzy. It isn't criticism because it's a hard call.
Yeah.
And like I say, you start watching $2,000 or $3,000 an acre foot water go spillway. It's very exciting. I mean, you're happy on one side, but you're not so happy on the other side.
Paul,
You just have one more slide, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, I
Let's
do.
just finish up. And
I think just to summarize, reservoir levels for this current year are still above average due to conservation and due to the wet winters prior, even though this year was about 90%. And we're expecting a wet winter from the super El Nino. And as we've seen with this historical data, water supply was available during the dry periods for use if the ARC project, the proposed ARC project, was available, the facilities to move surplus water to our local storage system.
Thank you for that. Ranjiv, do you want to go?
Great. Thanks, Jen. Thanks a lot, Lucy, for the good update. Is it fair, just following the discussion with Larry, that most years, the 5,300 that we are required to take, we're spilling.
Yeah.
So that's just part of the contract, part of the insurance package that we've established with Sonoma Water. And it's obviously, as Larry said, very hard to know when we would be ready to spend more because we can't predict. We're operating every year blind. And I know you had been evaluating a new product that was supposedly going to give us some estimate of winter precipitation. How did that work out, did it really make much of an impact on our operations?
It didn't factor in any of our decision making this year. 90% is even though it's short of our average it's a substantial amount of rainfall. So for us, it didn't really factor into our decision making. Uh, Director Cush is talking about some of those predictive software algorithms that are highly proprietary, and they take into account a lot of different factors and try to tell you how much rainfall and runoff you're going to get in your area. And while the particular one that we were looking at last year did not have specifics to marine water, even if it was able to tell us whether, in some confidence, whether it was going to be dry, we don't really care if it's going to be wet so much, although that's nice to know. But if, either case, wet or dry, if you could even go that far, 6 months ahead of time, you'd know that really taking Sonoma water in August was a good move, because you were going to be dry, or you could slow down and hit your 5,300 exactly by the next June. So it would be helpful. I don't think those programs and packages are quite there yet for us to have the confidence to make those sorts of purchase decisions. But there are people out there who, farmers have to make these decisions every year way in advance of really knowing what the rainfall is going to be. And the impacts to them are, of course, having to buy water to irrigate with, and how much they can get. And it's much more a bit complicated there. So they've got something that they have to do. We're not quite in that position yet. I think
they don't have storage.
Yeah,
that's the biggest difference.
There's a ways to go before those programs can really help us. But to your point, I think eventually those things will get there, I think, in terms of being able to predict long-term sort of weather patterns. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, although I'm not exactly sure how to articulate it. But I think you're probably aware there's been the big critique that we've been hearing about this project is that the numbers don't add up, that the amount of water we would need, it may be given the size of the pipe or how much could be brought at any one time, wouldn't get us where we needed to go. I just wondered if you have general thoughts, like if you've looked at those critiques and because one thing we didn't talk about in the presentation is sort of how long, I don't think we did, like when we would, well, you said January, we would start bringing water over, and how long of a period of time we would be using the pipe to bring that water over until the reservoir is filled. But anyway, I'm just trying to get my arms around why is there this discrepancy out there? And have you looked at that at all? And do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we are sizing the ARC facilities for 15 million gallons per day. And in what I showed tonight, I used an average, so 10.4, so not operating at maximum. And in the single year droughts, so 2021 and 2014, I showed that the water availability was there in the Russian River over 4 months. So using 10.4 over 4 months, and we were able to get 3,800 acre feet, which aligns with SWUSA. So I think that addresses the comments and questions we've gotten.
I mean, what we tried to do tonight is hit, and it's understandable where the questions come from because, right, it's a drought. Where's the water? And so what we tried to do is look at now our four kind of droughts of record, near term and long term away, and understand, confirm, and looking at it multiple ways, is there water available? And that's, there is a time factor because to get that full amount, you have to operate a certain amount of weeks and months. So the data is, I'd say, as conclusive as it can be looking backwards, right? We can't predict the future, but looking backwards, even in the most extreme droughts, there is water in the Russian River sufficient to take what we expect and we're planning for in terms of ARC. So really the hope was some of the folks that are raising those questions have the opportunity to see tonight's presentation in part. And, as more questions come, our goal is, to come back and answer and dive into the data, full transparency. And truly, every time we look at it, we're like, geez, no matter how we look at this, there is available water there, which is the threshold issue really for the project, and it's substantiated.
Thank you.
Director Russell, any more
Oh, yeah.
questions? Yep.
Oh, yeah. What I'm remembering is that the pipeline across the bridge in 76 was either 5 MGD or 10 MGD that it brought in, which made all the difference in the world to our ability to have a useful life in Marin. I would strongly recommend everybody watches a movie called Pressure, which is Eisenhower making the decision on D-Day to go forward or not based on the weather. And when Jack Kennedy was inaugurated, he spoke to Eisenhower and he said to him up on the inauguration stand, he said, "What was the difference between us and the Germans?" And Eisenhower's answer was that we had better meteorologists. My food clients are ag guys spend millions on these proprietary weathermen. They never complain about them. They never complain about the cost, at least not in front of me. And yet I know their problem, of course, is their money comes from the crop. No crop, no money. So it's like a worst case scenario. You really are screwed if that happens to you. I'd like you to, I think those are the greatest slides I've seen so far in this analysis. I question your comment, though, about getting the water and the amount that's going to waste or going out the mouth of the Russian River. I have asked this question at least a dozen times to Sonoma Water, and they have never answered it to my satisfaction yet, which is there a stage drop across the Rainy collectors? And to my understanding, there is not, meaning that the Rainies don't actually pool from the river. They pool from the groundwater under the river. And to that extent, it's kind of interesting. And further along that line, were they to pool from the surface water, Sonoma Water would have to have a water treatment plant on the aqueduct because surface influence groundwater is a real problem from the DDW standpoint. So you kind of have this tricky part of it. I don't know if they don't want to talk about it. Could be. They don't want to breach the DDW issue. But it seems to me that that's clearly the fact of life, that the what's in the above stream is probably useful to know, but I don't know that it has too much to do with actually what's happening to the groundwater system where you're actually getting the water from. So I would suggest being very careful with your words there, because I don't think the scenario actually described is what actually happens in this situation. Not a criticism at all, just a comment. It's tricky. My experience has been it's a very common problem with the misunderstanding of Rainy collectors. Working for the state of California in Sacramento, they have a Rainy collector that collects the cooling water for the entire downtown Sacramento government buildings. And we were hired to advise them on what to do. And they were out scarifying the bottom of the river when we showed up. And I said to them, That's an interesting approach. They were trying to increase infiltration. But I said, just look at the temperature of the water. The temperature in the Rainy collector is 10 degrees cooler than the water in the river. Well, how can that be, huh? I mean, it's obviously not coming from the river. And scarifying the bottom isn't going to do anything. So, like I say, I think there's sort of a basic misunderstanding of Rainies. And I think our friends in Sonoma misunderstand their Rainies, at least from my conversations with them. So be careful how you phrase it and think about it.
Great. Comment, not a question. Director Sampson, all good. Thank you so much for bringing this presentation. I had asked for it, I think, a few weeks ago, specifically around how we would look at the daily drought numbers to make our decisions. And do you mind pulling back up slide 10, which looked at the 2019, 2020, 2021 drought? And what I'm curious about, and you probably won't be able to answer this right now, but how do we think about the protocols that we will build on when we will take water? This goes to Director Russell's questions earlier. And specifically, what are you considering? So obviously you have some sort of triggers, and apparently finances is one of them. So my hunch is that's not the primary one for activating ARC, but at what date, what level of the reservoirs, predictive, looking at future patterns. And part of my question, and I'll hand it off to you, Paul, is if I'm looking at 2020, would you have been tempted to take water in January or February or March? So our reservoirs were not full. They typically are then. Yeah. And at what point did you decide that you wouldn't show that those would be the days that we would take it? And it seems obvious in 2021, clearly in retrospect, it looks to me like there's a potential that you would have done it maybe in March 2020.
So if I could have license to tell a very short story, as an ode to Director Russell, who at the time was banging the table, I think in January of 2020, saying, it looks dry. It looks dry this year. And we're like, God, the reservoir storage is looking great. I mean, we're at almost 70,000, 75,000 acre feet. Where are we going to put any water? But yeah, by March, as you're pointing out, Director Smith, that sort of message didn't stop, as you might imagine, and it built. And in fact, it was, I think, April or so of 2020 when we started really cranking up our purchases of water from Sonoma. So,
Krishna finally gave in.
Yeah. So it was. It's a valid question that we could have started using it.
I mean, it would show your use case better here if you say we would have done it then, and that would have added those days. But it's also, as you look at what the protocols are and what the triggers will be for when you kick this off, there may be some where it wasn't a good idea.
Right.
And so we should look at that also. Right. When did we spill? What was the impact on Nicasio?
Exactly.
So how do we build those very clear protocols that we can consider as a board for future boards, and be as thoughtful as possible? Like 15% of the time it spills, but this is a time to go for it.
There will be, an operating plan, and you may recall, Director Cush, we applied for a National Science Foundation grant, and part of that grant that we're developing is this tool that were we to surrender to the computer, it could make these very decisions for us. So it looks at total storage. It would look at storage available in the Nicasio Reservoir. Right. It would look at whether we're in a dry year or whether it's a normal year. It would factor in all of the time of the year that we're in and what those storage levels are. If there's runoff coming into the reservoir, how much runoff is coming into the reservoir? Are there storms predicted? So there's a number of things that we're looking at and trying to build a predictable, a usable set of criteria that we can
decision-making tools. I think that this is exactly what what I believe the Nicasio residents are looking for. Every time you dig into this, you continue, in my mind, to find answers that help resolve those questions. But the more they understand the protocols, when are the triggers, when are we going to kick it in, how will it impact them, the better. But right now they're throwing everything at us, right? They're throwing, you can't afford it. It's, there's environment, everything possible. So let's knock this one off as best you can and include them as much as you can in transparency with these meetings and others, please.
Understood.
It's very important. Okay, great. Any other comments, anyone?
I have one.
Yeah.
Along the lines of the computer, what I understand is that AI models on war always defer to the nuke approach. It defaults. It says you want to solve this problem, nuke them. And yet we don't, with the exception of once, do that. And I think there's certain parallels there in this same kind of thing. It's like sky's falling, do something.
Yeah.
And it's very tempting. But then, and I'm curious, your question is a very interesting one, because I'm curious if the engineers will actually give that decision up. Yeah, I don't think so either.
No.
The tummy rubbing, or whatever you want to call it, judgment,
Yeah.
always is the last step. And in Pressure, the movie, there's a big fight between historical evaluations of identical weather patterns and current data. And this Scottish guy, British naval officer, meteorologist, wins the fight against an American meteorologist who has been frightfully accurate in North Africa. And they go on to explain that North Africa is a very different situation. The weather is much more predictable than North England or North Atlantic. And, but the fight is there. It's exactly this argument of how much can you look back and how much can you look forward? And forward isn't quite the right term. The guy's really talking about real time. And I think that's what you're talking about, is real time, that using the real time data as opposed to historical data, because it's tricky.
Oh, yeah.
And the other thing that you hinted at but didn't really say it is that it's impossible to back up. And Phil's point. Once you make the decision not to take the water, you can't then just accelerate your more taking of the water. And I think Ron Chief's point, it was an excellent one too, that you're exactly right. I hadn't thought about it in those terms. And in one sense, it doesn't make any difference because it's pay or take, pay it. Either way, we're paying for it. So you kind of might as well take it under that scenario. But your point is a good one, that you still have spills occurring after you've taken the pay or take water.
I'm increasingly seeing the ARC project as insurance at this point, that we are not spending $200 million today. But as we move forward, we're continuing to move forward. We're continuing to do the design. We're continuing to work with the Army Corps of Engineers. This is not going to happen in a month or two. But when you look at the 1970s drought, when they built the pipeline across the bridge, which was, I believe, 10 million MGD, that was such an emergency that they went to President Carter, who helped get us federal funding at that time. So, as much as we want to conserve and be efficient and use less water, when there's zero water to use less of or very little, we're in a desperate situation. And if we get to the point where we have hopefully moved ARC along long enough that we can do that final bit of pipe, my guess is there will be very little resistance. And so we the more we continue to see this, I think, as insurance, that when the time comes, I think people will be clamoring for it, and hopefully we'll be as far along as we possibly can, both from an environmental impact, an impact on our communities, and an impact on our finances, and hopefully water resiliency for our customers. So thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. Any other board comments? Any public comments?
Yes, Phil Sauter, Larry Minikis, and Michael Hilber.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's good to see the project is on track. The frequent presentations on the ARC project, as encouraging as they are, have made me wonder if other water supply options might be falling by the wayside. 2 years ago, we declared conservation of potable water to be our primary water supply option. 18 months ago, we also had a presentation on recycled water. Last year, we were looking at the proposed raising of the Nicasio spillway, and a couple of months ago, we put in place a program to speed up our AMI coverage. We had a broad portfolio of options to increase potable water supply, and those are still on the website. But other than AMI, some of the other options seem to be losing focus. The board's demand management committee was disbanded and folded into the planning committee. And while Director Russell was committed to bringing demand management into that committee, I think the last presentation was almost a year ago. Recycled water was declared a $3 billion impossibility, and while that estimate was later backed off, there's been no recent public discussion of any effort to move that option forward. And the Nicasio Spillway project has been put on hold while creek restoration programs are being evaluated. AMI and its potential to reduce potable water demand is currently being advanced. Given the focus on increasing potable water supply and the importance of reducing potable water demand, along with the risk of putting most of our eggs in the ARC basket, it would seem to make sense to bring along a broader portfolio of water supply options, just in case the ARC project hits any snags. After watching the recording of the last Finance Committee meeting, I'll suggest a deeper look at recycled water for use in local pockets where there's high outdoor demand. Not only would a project like that significantly reduce demand for potable water, it would also provide much needed revenue commensurate with the cost of making it available to those who need it. And AI could be a great help in optimizing the location of these local networks, bringing in the greatest revenue with the smallest footprint. This request to broaden our water supply portfolio beyond primarily ARC is not an either-or request, but rather a way to ensure that we explore and develop a number of viable options. I think this will help increase the odds of success in increasing potable water supply. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening. I appreciate today's presentation, though I do wish we had access to this information much earlier in this process. It would have been very helpful. This evening's presentation does a good job demonstrating that historically, atmospheric rivers have occurred even during drought periods, and that water may likely have been available to capture over the period of months that will be needed to meet the 3,800-acre threshold. However, I believe several important questions remain unanswered before the district commits to further advancing this project. Today's presentation lacks a comparison with other potential alternatives, including advanced water recycling, indirect potable reuse, expanded local stormwater capture, storage, and reuse, and demand management. The environmental impact report should carefully evaluate whether this is the only option and the most effective and cost-efficient solution available. Before committing hundreds of millions of dollars over the coming years, I respectfully encourage the board to request a comprehensive alternatives comparison so that both the board and the public can fully understand the relative costs, benefits, and the risks of the options, of the available options. I also want to say, going back to 2020, we had a very dry December and we had nothing in January. And I came up before the board in February, early February and mid-February. I'll go back into the minutes and look if I need to. But that's when I stated it's time to think about rationing and to do something because it looked like a really bad year and it was a really bad year. So it's going to be kind of clear when it happens. You're going to see December, you're going to see a typical pattern, December and January, and that's going to be your trigger, I think, in most of the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Michael Hilber, please.
Thank you. Yeah, this can work, but it seems it's incredibly costly. And even if you have this pipeline in place, simply to operate it will be quite expensive. What I found strange is that retreatment will be required. And what's going on is you're paying the full freight for potable water, which I understand from Sonoma Water is up to $1,400 an acre foot, and you're transferring that into a reservoir, converting it to surface water, and to resell that, you'll have to treat it again to the potable water standard. So it's quite inefficient. I'm just, I just kind of find it strange that you can't find a source of surface water to top off this reservoir instead of paying for potable water to add to a reservoir, because it'd be a lot less costly if you could somehow find a way to transfer surface water this not potable, and you're not paying that outrageous $1,400 an acre foot to fill this reservoir. So yeah, and I heard you might get up to 4,000 acre feet per year through the ARC pipe, which at $1,400 an acre foot would be close to $6 million just for that, transfer into the reservoir. So, yeah, I would say yes, it worked, but you ought to, look hard at the numbers and see if there's, see what the net effect will be on your customers. That's it.
Thank you. Miss Marilyn Price, please.
Hi, yes, I want to thank you for this meeting. As an observer, just sitting in on your meetings, it's always frustrating to listen to the great comments that come from the public and then not hear any response to it. And tonight, you definitely have you have listened to the public and you are giving responses, and I really appreciate that. The only thing I would say as an ardent conservationist that I am, I just feel that as we go into the future, that conservation is one thing we really focus on. I really feel with what is going to be coming down the pike in the years to come, that conservation is going to be a main way that we can continue to support this planet. And I just know here in Marin, even though you keep saying the average customer is doing well, I know even they can do much better. I just know from the way we operate our home. So those are the comments I wanted to make tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Price. And Mr. Ed Jameson, please. Go ahead, Mr. Jameson.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I just point out that in April 1st of 2020, we had 71,000 acre feet in our reservoirs. There was no indication that we were about to head into a disaster. All this does is focus our need for additional supply, and it's very hard to predict how the rest of the year will turn out, or the next year in the case of 2021. It all just comes back to we need backup supply, and Sonoma is not the answer because they couldn't give us any either. Our drought was their drought. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Terrific. Okay, we'll move on to our future meetings, of which we have one tomorrow.
That is correct. Tomorrow, there is a closed session meeting over in Larkspur, specifically at the Courtyard by Marriott. And the closed session or the open session part begins at 7:15 a.m. So please be there. Further, the next Board of Directors regular meeting is Tuesday, the 21st. There will be a closed session. I believe it's an hour closed session following that meeting. Then there is a planning committee meeting on the 28th and a special meeting of the Board of Directors immediately following that planning committee. And I am not aware of any external meetings this month. That's all I have.
Terrific. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.